Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. For the last 2 days, we've heard from some of the most innovative voices making changes on the African continent. We have been able to learn and walk along the way together. The time has come now to reflect on our experience. But before leaving and closing what has been an incredible, thought-provoking 2 days journey, I would like to let you in the hands of our final speaker, who has a record which speaks for itself. Mrs. Cristina Duarte is the United Nations Special Advisor on Africa and Undersecretary General of the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa since the 1st of August 2020. She is the Strategic Advisor to the Secretary General on the interlinkages between peace and development in Africa and the focal point in the UN Headquarters for Relations with the African Group with regards to Africa's development. She supports the Secretary General in promoting coherence in the UN system's engagement in Africa, chairs the Interdepartmental Task Force on African Affairs, and advocates and mobilizes the United Nations, its member states, and other key stakeholders around Africa's transformative visions articulated in the 2030 and 2063 agendas. Without further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage for our closing note, Mrs. Cristina Duarte.
Thank you, Elise. Good morning from New York. And I would like protocol observe. I would like to start the closing remarks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the London School of Economics for convening this Africa Summit and for inviting me to deliver this closing keynote address. Allow me also to commend the full team of this year's summit, the global crisis as a catalyst for change. Typically, when we discuss the COVID-19, we focus on the negatives of the crisis, the devastating health impacts, the horrible loss of lives and livelihoods. And this is natural, since we are still in the middle of the crisis. But what a wonderful opportunity this summit is to consider what lies ahead, and to discuss possibilities for a brighter and perhaps even better future. It goes without saying that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused global disruptions, the likes of which we have never before seen. Globally, not one single country was prepared, and no country has escaped unscathed. Even the wealthiest countries continue to struggle with rising infection rates, overstressed health systems, mounting job losses, and significant economic losses. But as a special advisor on Africa, I must say that one positive spot in this time of crisis has been Africa's strong response. The continent's political and public health leaders have, for the most part, stepped up to meet the challenge of COVID-19, drawing from their experience with past epidemics to mount an early and rapid response. As a result, Africa had one of the most forward-looking approaches in seeking to halt the spread and prevent loss of life, including prompt and comprehensive lockdown measures and travel restrictions, widespread adoption and acceptance of mask wearing, and aggressive public awareness campaigns aiming at promoting necessary safety measures. However, this success notwithstanding, there is no denying that Africa has been hit hard by the pandemic and its cascading effects. In fact, Africa was hit by the economic impact of the crisis even before its impact on public health, as the global economy halted and Africa's growing, largely informal, service-based economy was forcibly shut down to combat the spread. The very containing measures that have helped to slow the spread of the disease are estimated to cost the continent around $69 billion per month. At the same time, African governments have had to substantially increase their spending to meet growing needs, causing debt to GDP levels to increase by 10 to 15 percentage points, and leaving governments with less flexibility to guide recovery efforts. As a result, 2020 saw Africa's GDP contract for the first time in 25 years, with African economies shrinking by an average of 2.1%. That is equivalent to a loss in GDP growth of over $100 billion. The combination of these factors has led to a loss of 10 million jobs in the formal sector and 100 million in the informal sector, pushing over 30 million Africans into poverty. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there is no question that COVID-19 has caused historic disruptions for the continent. Overcoming these disruptions requires new thinking, new tools, and new approaches. The aim cannot be simply to rebuild what we had before, because what we had before was clearly not fit for purpose. Instead, we need to do what we at UN call building forward better. In the short term, the needs are clear. Africa needs urgent access to vaccines to halt the infections and prevent greater loss of life. It needs immediate debt relief to ease the socioeconomic fallout of the crisis. It needs greater liquidity for urgent spending needs through an allocation of special drawing rights and the reallocation of unused special drawing rights. UN has been calling for this and other urgent relief measures and will continue to do so. But here, in these closing remarks, I want to discuss the long-term picture. What does Africa go from here? How do we not just recover, but, as we say at UN, build forward better? In the same way that necessity is the mother of invention, history has shown us that catastrophe is the mother of transformation. Every major disruption caused by the pandemic has revealed a fundamental structural flaw in approach. There are many lessons to be learned, and each of those lessons represent profound opportunities. To seize these opportunities, we must go beyond business as usual. Africa does not need to rewind. It needs to reboot, to fundamentally rethink and reset the system. A reboot for Africa could include any number of things that would collectively have positive impact. But there are two critical areas of focus that, when taken together, will have truly transformative impact on the continent and yield the fundamental reboot we are looking for: sustainable financing for development and digital transformation. On sustainable financing for development, there is no country or region in the world that is not focused on financing as a vital part of its recovery. Collectively, developed countries have spent trillions of dollars on stimulus packages that include direct payments to households, enhanced employment benefits, and financial support for ailing business and industries. In case of Africa, however, there is a powerful opportunity to reboot its financing for development at the foundational level. And that means rethinking and reshaping the continent's financing for development fundamental. First and foremost is rebooting Africa's domestic resource mobilization. Africa cannot possibly achieve structural transformation by relying on external financing or by focusing only on poverty reduction. The continent's success will ultimately hinge on maximizing its domestic resources as the driving force towards the achievement of its development agenda. Now, we all know that domestic resource mobilization is a vast landscape. I could probably deliver 3 keynote speeches discussing the need for African policymakers to focus on budget and tax revenues, domestic savings, and capital markets. All of these things are important, But there is one aspect of domestic resource mobilization that is so vital that by itself, it would promise incredible transformation. And that is illicit financial flows. Africa loses approximately $88.6 billion in illicit capital fight every year, equivalent to 3.7% of the continent's GDP. Illicit capital outflows from sub-Saharan Africa are particularly large, representing about 6.1% of the region's GDP. The $88.6 billion that Africa loses annually is not just a number. It's a representation of a multitude of missed development opportunities. It's hospitals without necessary supplies, schools with insufficient teachers and books. It's roads unbuilt and electricity not provided. It's ultimately a representation of loss of livelihoods and persistent poverty. In perhaps one of the worst cases of insult meeting injury, those billions that flow out of Africa don't just disappear. In many cases, they enter the international financial system, the very same system from which African countries borrow money. In the end, it is as if Africa is borrowing its own money and paying interest for the privilege. As a result, Africa is left without the resources needed to finance its development and is forced to turn to external financial sources such as ODA and concessional financing to make up the shortfall. Continent is essentially losing money with its right hand while asking for more with its left. If financing is the fuel for development, it is as if Africa is driving with a big hole in its gas tank. Will not get very far. Compounding the challenge of illicit flows out are the dangerous illicit flows that are entering African countries. Financial flows from organized crime, illegal mining, trade in illegal goods, and other illicit activities are fueling terrorism and conflict on the continent, while also destabilizing governments, which in turn creates fertile ground for more illicit flows outward. African governments, together with Africa's private sector, must take the lead in combating illicit financial flows and stop these emerging resources. But Africa cannot do it alone. For every hand that is giving the money, there is a hand overseas that is taking the money, largely in the developed world. For every African country of origin, there are countries of destination, and often several transit locations in between. We have to recognize that illicit financial flows are a global problem that require a global solution, including greater international tax cooperation and reform, strengthening global anti-corruption measures, and a commitment to mutual accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, the second reboot Africa needs is on trade, both regional and global. The numbers are stark. Currently, Africa accounts for just 2% of global trade. In addition, only 7% of African exports are intercontinental, compared with 59% for Africa and 68% for Europe. The pandemic has shown us exactly I'm sorry, how important regional trade and value chains are. African countries today are experiencing the great risks associated with relying on a few global economic regions for supply of goods and services. For example, as we speak, export restrictions are by several countries and regions to increase the domestic supply of COVID-19 vaccines and other critical pharmaceuticals have greatly affected Africa's ability to address the pandemic. This gives even greater urgency to the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, with a strong focus on supporting locally produced products, retaining profits, and galvanizing job creation and economy building initiatives. The agreement aims to strengthen continental trade while also enabling Africa to integrate better and further into global supply chains. Its creation of a single market with free movement of people, goods and services, reduce red tape, and simplify customs procedures is expected to create a 1.2 billion consumer market of African businesses. The expected effects are profound. $560 billion increase in Africa's exports. $450 billion boost in regional income. Significantly increase the wages for both skilled and unskilled workers. And 30 million people lived out of extreme poverty by 2035. According to Mo Ibrahim Foundation, if successfully implemented, the Continental Free Trade Area could generate a combined consumer and business spending of $6.7 trillion by 2030. The transformative effect of the Continental Free Trade Area will be a game changer for Africa, allowing the continent to gain vital self-sufficiency while also making greater headway in global value chains. Only by doing so can Africa build resilience in the medium and long term and reduce its global shocks to come. Ladies and gentlemen, rebuilding Africa also requires strong private sector engagement, with an emphasis on both domestic and global. There is no denying the power of private sector investment in Africa, but meaningful and transformative engagement of the private sector as a stakeholder is to understand exactly what the stakes are. From a global private sector perspective, Africa is an as of yet untapped gem, with potential for far greater returns on investment than other regions. The key to unlocking this potential lies not in a race-to-the-bottom approach of attracting the global private sector at all costs, but instead in the creation of an enabling environment that emphasizes mutual benefit and both short and long-term gains. Equally important, and all too often left in the cold, is Africa's domestic private sector. They will be critical drivers of innovation and job creation on the continent, and also play a vital role in forming a tax base for domestic resource mobilization. But Africa's private sector cannot do it alone. African governments must create not just an enabling environment for private sector development. There needs to be an encouraging environment for domestic private sector, marked by clear institutional commitment, regulatory support, and elimination of bottlenecks and bureaucratic red tape. Across Africa, we have seen sparks of success during the pandemic. In countries like Ghana, when government and private sector work hand in hand to turn idle stocks of alcohol into life-saving sanitizers. Or in Kenya, and Uganda, where textile companies negatively impacted by pandemic-related global supply chain blockage were mobilized to rapidly supply vital personal protective equipment. These are only a few examples of many. What they show is that with sufficient political will and forward-looking institutional support, governments and the private sector can come together to galvanize local productive capacity, drive growth, and generate diversification. Finally, Africa's reboot cannot be achieved without innovation, particularly in the area of digital technologies. The only way for Africa to advance in the 21st century is by adopting science, technology, and innovation in a massive way. Digital technologies have unlocked powerful pathways for economic growth, innovation, job creation, and access to services that would have been unimaginable even a decade ago. They have become crucial accelerators of virtually every aspect of development, from tracking and processing big data, to fostering rapid communication, to facilitating greater effectiveness and transparency in governance. Unfortunately, the digital divide has prevented Africa from seizing the opportunity, as it trades other regions in digital penetration, usage, and capabilities. Only 28% of Africa's population has access to the internet, with a wide range of constraints that include lack of access to electricity, insufficient financial inclusion, and the absence of enabling regulatory frameworks. This digital divide has served to reinforce prevailing inequalities on the continent and widen the gap between the haves and have-nots. To seize the opportunity of digital innovation, it is essential to adopt policies conducive to digital advancement and invest quickly and at scale in the necessary infrastructure. Of equal importance are bottom-up efforts at the level of domestic companies and communities. More than 400 technology hubs have emerged across the continent, driven by young people who, despite adversities, are realizing how self-employment is linked to innovation. 3 of these hubs in Lagos, Nigeria, Nairobi, Kenya, and Cape Town, South Africa, have achieved international recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, rebooting Africa will not be easy, but it's clear that it's necessary. We must make every effort to internalize the lessons of this crisis and to turn those lessons into opportunities. Africa will have to do much of the work, with particular focus within. But there is not a single aspect of Africa's transformations that can be done alone. But as you have seen, the Africa of today and its vision for tomorrow call not for benefactors, but for partners. I hope that years in the future, we can look back at this pandemic, not just as a crisis, but as a catalyst for much needed change in Africa and the world. Working together, we can achieve the Africa we want, and in doing so, realize the world we want. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Back to you, Elise.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cristina Duarte, for these words and for giving us food for thought. We are very grateful to have been able to reflect together on, in your own words, how to reboot Africa and turning challenges into opportunities. This weekend, we've been challenged, encouraged, and called to action. We hope that you have enjoyed this event and trust that we will all use what we have learned here to make a change in whichever way we can. On these final words, and on behalf of the whole Africa Summit team, I would like to thank all participants, speakers, and moderators for joining us, but also all the people who made this event possible. Among them, our sponsors, the Boston Consulting Group, the Economic and Social Research Council, the Atlantic Fellows, UK Black Pride, the African Diaspora Development Institute, the London School of Economics, Mac and Ernest, Move Back, and the Firoz Lalji Center for Africa. The event has been recorded and will be broadcasted later on social media platforms for those of you who would like to review it or that didn't get the chance to attend all sessions. The session of Ambassador Arcana Shiombori Kwaro that didn't take place today will also be made available. Lastly, we would like to remind you that the platform will stay open until 6 p.m., so feel encouraged to wander around a little, sit in the lounge for a discussion, and meet other participants to reflect further. One idea to start the discussion, maybe with other participants, I would suggest would be to go with the question that I see in this Q&A, which is, where do we begin? Well, on this note, I think that's a great question, a lot of food for thoughts, and I'm going to leave you guys to discuss it among yourselves in the tables. It was a pleasure to meet all of you, and we truly hope that you enjoyed the event as much as we did. Thank you very much.